correctness, you've come to the wrong place. It's Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, 103.9 LI News Radio.
Hi, folks. This is Suffolk County Executive Steve Levy, former County Executive Steve Levy. Welcome to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. This is your show. We welcome you to call in over the next 2 hours at 451-1039. The 1039 is the same spot on your radio, 103.9 FM here at Long Island Talk Radio. Tell your friends as well that they can listen in on linewsradio.com. You don't have to be within range. You can listen to this station anywhere in the U.S. at any time on the web. I was in Florida a few months ago and was doing so and enjoyed it quite a bit. As you know, this station has live call-in for Long Islanders about all kinds of issues, things ranging from the federal government to the state to right here in Suffolk County, which you will not find anywhere else. So we do encourage you to call in. For the first 20 minutes, I speak about different issues that have come up over the past week, and then we get into the phone calls and some guests. Now, in our second segment, we're going to have one of the preeminent political strategist in all Long Island, Mike DeWidziak. Mike handles all kind of candidates, mostly Republicans, but will help others as well. When I was a Democrat, Mike had helped me get into office. So he is in the elite as far as those who are aware of current events, whether it's on the federal, state, or local level. So that'll be interesting. We're going to talk about bias in the media. And, in our from our perspective, there is a stark liberal bias in the media. We want to hear from you. Do you agree, disagree? We'll throw out some examples. Then we'll mix it up between Mike and Dave Sprinson. Dave has been here a few times in the past. He's from the Long Island Progressive Coalition, and he's fantastic because he's very articulate, he's very knowledgeable, and he's very proud of his liberal base, and it makes for some great debate. And between Mike on the right and David on the left, and you calling in, it could be a very, very interesting half hour. And then in the last half hour, we'll have just David and myself going toe-to-toe, sometimes agreeing on things and sometimes not. But let's get into the first session here. And last week, I think I was somewhat prophetic because I made mention about the rancher in Nevada. And I warn conservatives, be careful about this guy. Don't go rallying to make him a hero. And as is the case, he railed off some absolutely ridiculous, insulting, and racist comments over the past week. And I'm one who thinks that word racist and racism is terribly overused in this politically correct world. They shouldn't use it too much because then when it really happens, as was the case this past week with those outrageous statements from Cliven Bundy, the rancher, that's what you find the real racism is when he says blacks were better off in slavery than on the dole for public assistance. Really crazy, crazy stuff. But, we warned back then that this issue is one that epitomizes the extremes on both sides here in this country. And I'm not a kind of guy who looks at what's the Democratic perspective or the Republican perspective. In fact, when I formed my business, I paid a lot of money to get the moniker Common Sense Strategies because I think common sense should trump what's Democrat or Republican. And I really can't stand it when some folks just take a particular line. Well, that's what conservatives or Republicans are supposed to do, or this is what liberals or Democrats are supposed to do. And I looked at this issue, and it looked like it was really an example where both were overboard. When I saw these militiamen rallying around Cliven Bundy, and I say, wait, this isn't right. I mean, this guy wasn't paying what the other ranchers were paying. He was definitely in the wrong. He went through the courts and lost. So now what do? You put militiamen, snipers on the bridges to confront our law enforcement people in the federal government. You might not like government. You might think government is very inefficient. But when you start bringing up arms against federal officials, man, is that dangerous? Is that over the line? And that's what he did. And on the other end, you had, the Harry Reid types spouting this hypocrisy, being concerned about the rule of law in this case, but not concerned about the rule of law when in Occupy Wall Street, folks are taking over public parks. And, with illegal immigration, they just totally ignore the rule of law there. So in both cases, the extremists were highlighted to an amazing degree. But you got to be careful. You got to be careful who you lie down with, because as the old saying goes, you might wake up with fleas. And that's what happened with those who rushed to make this guy, Cliven Bundy, a hero. You had a lot of conservatives out there like Krauthammer and George Will, and even O'Reilly took a very measured approach. They were right. The others who went overboard and made him a hero, they have a lot of egg on their face today. Now, I want to talk about some Long Island things that came up over the last week, and one of them was right in Hauppauge High School yesterday. Brian Kilmeade from Fox and Friends, he's a really dynamic, energetic participant in that program, has his own radio show, which is aired here on LI News Radio every morning, every weekday morning. And I love his politics, and he makes his show very entertaining. He's a Long Islander, Brian lives in Massapequa, was raised here in Long Island, and he wrote this great book, and he had a book signing ceremony, and he had probably, several hundred people there. It was a great event. I haven't read the book yet. I just bought it yesterday. And it's called Washington's Secret Six, and he talked about how the 6 spies for the Patriots here on Long Island were pivotal in turning the direction of the war. People from, Talmadge, Mr. Talmadge from Setauket, folks in Oyster Bay. Very fascinating. I'm looking forward to read it. You folks might want to look at it too. It's on Amazon from what I hear. Washington's Secret Six. Check it out from a good guy, Brian Kilmeade. Did you see this other reference for Long Island? I don't know if you guys have seen The House of Cards. What an awesome show. I used to be hooked to The West Wing on NBC back in, I guess, the 90s. Great show there. But this is equally as good. It's only on Netflix, and I think you could probably get it on DVD as well. Great show with Kevin Spacey. He's a little overboard. I've seen some cutthroat stuff in politics. I've never seen it to this extent where they're dealing with murder and stuff like that. But there was one point in the show where the vice president is dealing with this Chinese lobbyist. And what does the Chinese lobbyist want? He wants a bridge built from Port Jeff to one of the towns. It wasn't Bridgeport. It was one of the towns in Connecticut. And saying, boy, we've been talking about this for 2 generations here on Long Island. Wouldn't it be interesting if this kind of conversation in this fictional TV show actually led to some real hard conversations here to have that type of bridge built? And of course, they were talking about having it a public-private partnership. We actually saw the late Vince Palomini, a major developer here in Long Island, talk about building a tunnel from the end of the Seaford Oyster Bay Expressway over to Rye in Westchester. And it was going to be totally privately financed with monies being paid back through tolls, and couldn't even get off the ground. So let's see if this conversation on a national show can get some local and federal people talking about it. Another biggie this week was Richard Ravitch, Dick Ravitch, who was one time the lieutenant governor under David Paterson's tenure, and was probably more famously known as one of the guys, the main players, in rescuing New York City in their point of near bankruptcy in the 1970s. Well, Ravitch is writing a book, and that's going to be published sometime, I guess, this month. And he's basically talking about how we are not out of the woods yet in state and local governments. There are a lot of people saying, oh, the worst is behind us. And I think Ravitch is very astutely noting that is not the case. There are still some major, major problems ahead. And he's saying it like it is. I testified at a Senate committee right after Dick Ravitch the question was, will New York become the next Detroit? And he laid it on the line. I laid it on the line. We've got to deal with the structural imbalances within these local governments. And that is because the pension costs are rising exponentially. Healthcare costs are rising exponentially. Many of the public employee costs are rising exponentially, even though now have a slowdown in the rate of growth of some of the salaries. If you're a 20, 30-year employee in public works, you might not making that much. But if you, as we know, you're a law enforcement official in some of these local governments, you're now making close to $200,000. And that is just simply no longer sustainable. And what Ravitch is saying is, the cupboard is bare. Some of these schools, some of these local governments have been getting by because of their reserves, which are now depleted, or because of borrowing, where they're kicking the can down the road. And you've got to get to the point where you can straighten that out. Now, both Nassau and Suffolk were out there touting how they have, balanced budgets this year. But as George Marlin, a former member of the NIFA board, has said many times, that's on a cash flow basis, maybe, because when you borrow money, you have cash. So if you're just looking at what is your cash relative to your expenditures, you might be in the black temporarily. But when that one-time infusion of cash is no longer there the next year and the expenditures are still there, you have a structural deficit under generally approved accounting principles. So Ravitch is warning about that, and rightly so, and thank God he is a voice out there. You've got people like E.J. McMahon of the Empire Center for New York Policy. You've got a Dick Ravitch. You've got people from the Center for Cost-Effective Government, which I'm a proud member of. You got people for Long Islanders for Educational Reform, all saying the same thing. The worst is not over yet. So, folks, there still has to be some tightening up. So let's hope that folks listen. Speaking of the Lifer Group, Long Islanders for Educational Reform, I want the folks out there to know May 8th, there's a major meeting that's going to be taking place at the Melville Marriott. And you're all welcome. It's free. I'm going to be moderating that very proudly. We're going to have representatives from the School Boards Association, from the state, from the towns, from different levels of government, all talking about the crushing impact that mandates are having on local budgets. We're going to be talking about the Tri-Borough Amendment, which was unique to New York State, where even after a contract has expired, employees in the public sector continue to get their step increases of, maybe 3-4%. We're talking about mandatory arbitration and the need to end it. It's the scourge that has given us the $200,000 police salaries. We're talking about the need for real pension reform, not the tinkering. We have to mirror more of the private sector, where it's a defined contribution, where you give in, the employer gives in, and it goes up or down with the market. Unlike the public sector, which is defined benefit, where there's a guaranteed return, and if the market is not doing well, taxpayers make up the difference. We're talking about ending these cash outs for sick days and vacation days, where people are leaving government with $300,000 in checks just for their unused sick and vacation. It's really absurd. Something has to stop it. And this May 8th meeting at 7 p.m. at the Melville Marriott is one of the first steps. We're going to be pushing the bill introduced by Assemblyman Michael Fitzpatrick that would do away with a lot of these mandates. Another thing in the news this week, Obama did it again. We thought that after his election that the president was going to finally say, look, we all know that Keystone Pipeline has to be approved. We're going to approve it. Nope. Did it again. So now the question is it a delay just until the midterms are over, Or is he just going to stall this out all the way till the end of his term? I have a feeling it's going to be the latter. And what a shame that is. It is so disgraceful. This is politics at its worst. And we're going to get into this in the next segment with Mike Dawidziak when we talk about, media bias. How, maybe it is that the leftists and the extremists are scared of billionaire Tom Steyer, who has said that he's going to be funding campaigns against those who are for the Keystone Pipeline. Now, when the Koch brothers do this, okay, on the conservative end, they are vilified as trying to buy elections. But when a liberal billionaire like Steyer does it with Keystone, not a big deal. It's a good cause to the folks in the media. But it's strikingly and alarmingly similar to what's happening here with another Democratic executive here in New York State with Andrew Cuomo, what he's doing with fracking. Now you have North Dakota and you have Pennsylvania just booming because of fracking. It has revolutionized our nation where we're no longer dependent on the Middle East for our oil. It's made us cleaner. It's made us more economical. It's made us safer as a nation because we're not under the thumb of Russia like Germany is. And yet you have these extremists that are running the show, and just like President Obama is running out the clock with Keystone, you see Governor Cuomo running out the clock with fracking. While all these other states are doing very well and helping our nation, in New York, those folks upstate continue to go into decay because they don't have a major industry to help them out. This can help out those folks. It can help out our state revenues, and it can help out our national security. But again, the environmental extremists run the show not only in Washington, but we see here in Albany as well. And that dovetails to what's going on here in a local Senate race, where you have an avid environmentalist, Adrian Esposito, who is going to be the Democratic candidate for that key Senate seat for Lee Zeldin's spot. Lee, as you know, is leaving to run for Congress. And I like Adrian. I think she's very reputable as an environmental activist. I actually appointed her to our planning commission because I really like to have balance on my commissions. That's different, though, folks. That is different than having that person as an elective representative for Long Island, because these folks who are these one-issue candidates have tunnel vision. It's all about their one issue. And, the elected is supposed to be the balancing factor between the extremist environmentalist and the developer or the taxpayer. You have to balance all these things together. You don't want the extremist on one way or the other being your actual policy makers. It's kind of like the fox watching the chicken coop in those cases. Again, good people, good motives, but it leads to very bad, very dangerous policy in my mind. But we're going to be talking about that issue later when Dave Sprinson gets here in our later segment. So again, we're going to have Mike Dawidziak, Republican strategist. I should say he's just a strategist. He's done Democrats and Republicans. Me, when I was both a Democrat and a Republican. We're going to be talking about bias in the media. Dave Sprinson from the Progressive Coalition, because we do like that balance, is going to be talking about Keystone Pipeline, the affirmative action decision from the Supreme Court this week. How about the Long Island Railroad? Isn't it time that these guys gave in a little bit so that riders don't have to take it on the chin? We'll talk about Andrew Cuomo and whether he is going to face a challenge from the left. We may talk about income inequality. Should we legalize marijuana? What about mosques? We had Pete King going to a mosque here on Long Island, and we had a new declaration from Commissioner Bratton and Mayor de Blasio that they're stopping surveillance at the mosque. Good idea or bad idea? We're going to want to hear from you at 451-1039. Again, this is Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. Hey, one final note in the last 2 minutes here. Did you catch Governor Rick Perry taking on Governor Cuomo, and Governor Cuomo didn't take the bait, but very interesting. You've got Governor Cuomo spending $140 million. That is not a typo, folks. $140 million of your taxpayer dollars, speaking out on television stations around the country. Come to New York. We're business friendly. Now, after you stop laughing about that, noble effort, I guess. Is it to try to spread the word, for a potential presidential run that, look, this is a new New York, that we're not tax crazy? I don't know. But Perry came in and called them on it and said, are you kidding me? Are you going to try to put up New York against like Texas or Florida or Ohio or some of these other areas where things are really starting to pick up? You can't compare. I mean, New York, thanks to Governor Cuomo, you actually have, one of the highest income tax rates in the nation for those who have been successful. They had a slight decrease or negligible decrease for those in the middle class. But don't be fooled. There was not a tax cut in New York. The taxes were actually raised because the so-called temporary surcharge that was supposed to dissipate, well, they extended it ad infinitum. So that raised $2 billion extra dollars every year to New York coffers. You might say it's good, you might say it's bad, but don't say it was a tax cut. But anyway, again, I've said this many times, but the reason LeBron James took less money to go to the Miami Heat was not only because of Pat Riley, their great general manager, or Dwayne Wade. It was because there's no state income tax in Florida. That's a lot of money. That's 9% to people in New York who've been successful. The areas that are doing well, Texas, Florida, no state income tax. They have good, solid policies. Scott Walker in Wisconsin, Kasich in Ohio, good policies that are low tax, pro-business, and the economy prospers. You agree with me? You would disagree with me? It doesn't matter. We want to hear from you. 451-1039. Call us on the next segment. You're listening to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. We'll see you in a few.
peaceful vigil on the beach in Milford, Connecticut last night. Hundreds of students gathered to remember 16-year-old Miriam Sanchez murdered just hours before last night's junior prom, which was postponed.
She was amazing. She did everything right. Everybody loved her. She was always smiling.
A 16-year-old boy charged with her murder is undergoing a psychiatric evaluation. There are reports that he stabbed Sanchez to death after she rejected his prom proposal. An Ohio mother with late-stage inoperable cancer got to see her 17-year-old daughter's graduation thanks to an impromptu grad ceremony alongside her hospital bed, organized by school officials after hearing the mother was terminal. A trip to an ice cream shop in Buena Park, California, ending in tragedy after an SUV slammed into the crowd outside.
The SUV jumped a curb, plowing into an area where people were waiting in line outside the ice cream parlor. Orange County Fire Authority Captain Ben Gonzalez says one person was killed, 6 more injured, but it could have been worse.
You know, it's a busy night in front of a restaurant. You know, people waiting to go into the restaurant.
Police are now trying to figure out why it happened. They say the driver, a man in his 70s, is cooperating. Alex Stone, ABC News, Los Angeles.
It's against the law. Still, 1 in 3 exotic animal owners in Ohio do not have permits required to keep them. The state crackdown began after a suicidal owner released dozens of wild animals. This is ABC News.
LI News Radio traffic.
On Sunrise Highway, traffic moving well eastbound and westbound between the Side Coast and the Hamptons. If you're going to be traveling on the LIE, you should have no extra problems right now in Suffolk County. Still some congestion along Route 347. This would be between Wisconsin and Perryville. And along Route 25, we have some stop-and-go traffic at times around Wisconsin, Lake Grove, Selden, and Coram. You are looking good on Route 112, both northbound and southbound, and there are no unusual problems for folks traveling on the parkway. MTA says Long Island Railroad trains on or close to schedule, and we're also looking good for flights in and out of Long Island MacArthur Airport. I'm Bernie Wagenblast on 1039 LI News Radio.
LI News Radio weather.
Heaviest morning rain now ending. We get a little break before another brief chance of showers before gradually becoming mostly sunny. West winds later, high 63. Then showers likely again, possibly a thunderstorm tonight. Meteorologist John Weatherby, 1039 LI News Radio.
Geez Louise, we got our butts kicked this winter. I'm not even sure if winter is over yet. One day hot, one day cold. Holy cannoli, this global warming? Well, no matter what time of the year it is, you need to save money on your heating oil. That's why Wise Choice Fuel Oil is the smart choice all year long. Just go on their website, wisechoicefuel.com, and the daily low prices will show up right on your screen. That's it. Call them at 419-6391 and order what you need when you need it. No long-term contracts that give you nothing. No automatic deliveries that keep coming and coming. And if you do need service, Wise Choice Service Partners are available to you. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no worries. So no matter what time of year it is, when it comes to fuel oil and you need to make a choice, make the wise choice. 419-6391. That's 419-6391. Or log on at wisechoicefuel.com. And remember, we'll beat any price by 3 cents.
Westbury Toyota is expanding its dealership, and they want you to benefit from their pre-grand opening of the new showroom sale. Drive away in a 2014.5 Camry LE, including backup camera. Now available at Westbury Toyota for the end-of-the-month sale special. Only $7,500, and that includes your taxes. That's only $7,500 with taxes included. Call 877-403-9970 to reserve your 2014.5 Camry LE today. That's 877-403-9970. This offer is so good, I'm telling you twice. Call or stop in now for this unbelievable offer from Westbury Toyota. They are expanding their dealership and need to make room. Be one of the first ones to drive off in a 2014.5 Camry LE with backup camera for only $7,500, taxes included. Call 877-403-9970. 877-403-9970. Stop in and become a part of the Westbury Toyota family.
Hi, I'm Ray Manzoni, licensed real estate broker and host of Guaranteed Sold with Ray Manzoni. Learn more about selling and buying every Sunday afternoon at 1. Need to sell now? Call 631-928-1188 or visit GuaranteedSoldWithRay.com.
Looking for a new kind of drive? Atlantic Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram Pre-Owned Center is it. Driven to save you more with 250 unbeatable deals. The Atlantic Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram Pre-Owned at AtlanticCJDR.com or 1-800-NEXT-RIDE.
Holy
Hey, welcome back, folks. This is former County Executive Steve Levy, and you're listening to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. We're here every Saturday live, and we welcome your phone calls. This is your radio station. We're at 631-451-1039, just like it is on your dial, 103.9, 451-1039. Anytime, call in about anything, but you might want to listen to some very interesting conversation we're going to have over the next 20 minutes with a very good friend and, again, one of the elites when it comes to political strategy here on Long Island, and you can say in the whole Northeast, and that's Mike DeWidziak. The whole nation, Mike DeWidziak. Hello, Mike. Welcome back.
Hey, good to be here, Steve.
Yeah, I cut you short there because you were very heavily involved with the Bush Quail campaign going back.
That's right, 88 and 92, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. If you're in Mike's office, it is the coolest office because you see all of these buttons from just about every race in history, and photos with George Bush at Kennebunkport, Maine, and you've done some very high-profile races, including this guy running for county legislator in 1985 who was not supposed to win.
Not supposed
Some guy
to win.
named Levy. And you're to blame if people didn't like what came after that. So, but welcome back to the show.
Oh, good to be here.
Well, there's so many things that I could talk to you about, but one of the things that really got me thinking about you is when I was hearing over the last 2 weeks about Cheryl Atkinson,
yes.
who was an CBS reporter who basically quit. She said, I had enough. The liberal bias in the media was just too much for her. And she's the first one to say, listen, I am not an ideologue. I'm not a liberal. I'm not a conservative. I try to go right down the line. And I just felt the pressure that, if I were going to pursue Benghazi or I was going to pursue something on the IRS, the editors just cut it off at some point. And, her feeling was that wasn't going to be the case when it was a Bush presidency. And, I've been a big critic of this. In fact, I'm penning a book right now called Bias in the Media, which will be out very soon. And I've found that reporters themselves don't think they're biased. They don't know they're biased. They don't even think they're biased. They just think, they're mainstream and everyone, around them, if they don't agree with them, is like a flaming extremist conservative. And it kind of reminded me like when I was in Stony Brook University in the 70s, and I considered myself a moderate, but compared to the radicals who were like either teaching the courses or TAs or just the nature of students at the time, they probably considered me a fascist. It was all relative. And I think you see that a lot in the media. What do you know about Atkinson's situation, and do you think there's truth in what she's saying?
Well, there is, but first of all, she had to have known the situation she was in. I mean, she was there for 20 years. I mean, it's not like she didn't see this the situation as it was. Interestingly enough, there was a book published over 25 years ago called "Who Killed CBS News," and the whole idea of that book and the facts of the case is that CBS News as an organization doesn't really exist. They are a division under the entertainment division of CBS. So
has that always been the case, or is that the case recently?
Well, there was a lot of independence back in the days of Edward R. Murrow. There was an independence to the news organization, and even under Walter Cronkite. But after that, after Cronkite left, really, the CBS News as an independent news organization really ceased to exist. Like I said, it's a division under the entertainment division. And I mean, look, first of all, you probably know the answer to this, but I often ask people, do you know what grade level the national nightly news is written on? Okay, the answer, do you want to take a guess?
I'll say 8th.
Oh, not bad. 5th.
5th, okay. Are you smarter than a 5th grader, is basically?
It's written on a 5th grade level, first of all. And second of all, have you ever noticed how it comes out the same way every night? Every night. It comes out that there's like 5 minutes of international news, 10 minutes of national news, one human interest story.
Right.
You ever notice how it comes out the
But
same way every night?
That's you're right. That's
It's a
entertainment. That's
formula.
not necessarily biased.
No,
but
but
it's
no,
entertainment.
I'm going to get to the bias.
And by the way,
part.
folks, you're listening to Mike DeWidziak, the head of strategic planning, a pollster, and a political strategist here in Long Island. And this is the Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy show. And you're welcome to call in at 451-1039. And we're talking about, is there bias in the media? And I wanted to get to what sparked it was not only what Cheryl Atkinson was saying as far as her being stymied in her desire to proceed with investigation on Benghazi, but it was also an editorial I saw about Mike Bloomberg from Newsday this week, okay? And Mike Bloomberg, the former mayor, said, all right, now what am I going to do with my life? I'm going to take $50 million out of my pocket and start sprinkling it around to different candidates out there who are going to run on gun control. And, he's got a right. This is America. But, everybody hated that Citizens United case, which said, hey, you can contribute as much as you want. And, of course, if the Koch brothers, who are the stalwarts for conservative ideology on the right, give money, it's dirty. The system is terrible. They're buying elections. Oh, but now Mike Bloomberg is doing it for an issue that the liberals in the media think is a noble cause. What a great thing. Go for it, Mr. Bloomberg.
Yeah. Well, but again, you see, my point before was that once you get down to an entertainment formula, there's no mandate to be fair and balanced in that situation. You get to Bill Maher, basically. I'm running an entertainment show here, and I'll say what I want, and I'll do whatever way I want, and that's infiltrated basically all mainstream media at this point.
It's interesting, too. One of the things I write about in my book is this blurring of the lines where Walter Cronkite, even though he was liberal in his perspective, tried to do it down to him, but he would never go on a show to talk commentary.
No.
You were either a commentator or you were hard news. Now you see these guys all the time. Hard news guys, and I see it on Fox too. So they're and in MSNBC, they're blurring those lines. You've got in Newsday now. You have this spin cycle, which I know you like to rail against. It's almost like legalized slander in a way. You don't have to have sources,
and you don't have to go for comment. You don't have to go even to the principle of the story for a comment or anything. There are no rules that apply to it whatsoever.
It's just reporters. These are hard news reporters writing their opinion or gossip on the web, and that becomes news.
Yeah. Getting back to the days of Walter Cronkite, when they had an editorial, they did have editorials. Eric Severide might do a commentary, and they put the editorial sign underneath him while he talked to tell people this is not news right now. This is commentary.
Right.
The lines were very, very clear back then. Now, forget it. I mean, somebody just gets behind a desk and they just start talking. Sometimes it's news, sometimes it's commentary.
And Mike DeWidziak, you just mentioned Bill Maher, and I saw it last night. And by the way, you're listening to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. My guest is Mike DeWidziak, political strategist, and you can call in at 451-1039. He has Tom Steyer on. Tom Steyer, a liberal billionaire who now says, he's going to start giving money out to candidates who are against the Keystone Pipeline, who are for all these environmental causes. And again, you've got Bill Maher saying, what a great guy you are. And in the same show is pummeling Sheldon Adelson, the right-wing conservative. And so, they're different because Steyer is for things that aren't to his economic interest, and Adelson's are. It's like, well, who are you to say that? They're taking their billions and spending it on political speech, but in one case it's good, in one case it's bad, depending on your perspective.
Right. Well, did you notice at one point he was asking the question, how do Republicans win it all? And his answer was they cheat. And one of the ways he said that they cheat was redistricting and gerrymandering. Like the Democrats don't do that. I mean, he absolutely just got up there and said it like only the Republicans do that.
And we're talking about Bill Maher, who's way out there and though he fools you every once in a while. But let's say he doesn't hold himself out to be a news guy. But if you're going to talk hard news, but that's different. But even when you talk about the hard news guys, I mentioned in my book, and I got this example from you, is where you noticed how like Newsday would cover two different judges, okay, and one judge had done some pretty bad stuff,
Right.
and they made sure that in the front paragraph,
Right.
it was Republican judge so-and-so did X, Y, and Z. And then there was another judge who had some problems.
He actually had been convicted of money laundering with the Gambino crime family. He
Never mentioned that he was a Democrat.
Never mentioned. The D word was not mentioned in the story. And actually, when I brought it to their attention, actually, their immediate reaction, and this goes back to your saying that they don't even realize the bias that they have, and this is true on the right too, by the way.
Right.
But they don't even realize the bias that they have, because when I pointed it out to them, their initial reaction was, "We would have never done that." And then when I showed them the two stories side by side, they were like, "Oh yeah, we did."
Well, that's what I found whenever I tried to go to editors and tell them, hey, your reporter is showing some outrageous bias here that's gone to the sake of unprofessionalism. It was a rally around the reporter mentality.
Yes.
Very similar to what you saw in that, I don't know if you ever saw that movie Shattered Glass, where this fellow Stephen Glass was making up quotes, and it took them a long, long time to finally disavow themselves of the guy when the smoking gun was just like so inevitable they couldn't ignore it anymore. But there's that rally, no, we would never do that. They don't realize it. Similarly, Joe Mandello, the Republican leader in Nassau,
Right.
wrote into Newsday, really irate, saying, how come every time you mention my name, it's Republican boss Joe Mandello, but whenever my counterpart Jay Jacobs is mentioned, it's Nassau Democratic leader. And he was right. I went back and I Googled it. And I was looking at it. He was absolutely right. And I don't think these reporters or editors realize that they're doing that.
No, I don't think they do either. I think it's become so habitual now that they think that leaning that far to the left is actually a level horizon now. They did. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think they, and I think that's just human nature. By the way, it's just that they're running a newspaper, and people expect them to be fair and balanced.
I've also seen reports. I don't know if I think I read it in Bernie Goldberg's amazing book Arrogance, and he wrote one about bias a little bit before that. There are polls, there are statistics, and you're a pollster yourself. You've probably seen it. When you ask reporters, do you find yourself as liberal, conservative? Do you find yourself as Democrat, Republican? 90% were either liberal or Democrat in their self-professed.
That's right. Yes.
But they think that they can shield that from their writing, and see what they don't realize, and this is what they really should teach in journalism classes, and this is what I write about in my book, is that the bias comes in not necessarily in writing false information or necessarily misquoting someone, but it's deciding who you're going to quote in the first place, who you're going to call for a quote.
Oh, what you leave out too.
What you leave out.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I remember when a very biased reporter was writing about my financial disclosure forms, for instance, to bring it back to Long Island, and she was trying to insinuate that I had done something wrong in not filing a county form. And then when we said, well, no, we filed a state form because I was required by law to file the state form. That part was left out, that I was required by law. And here were four of the main ethics professors in the state who say, yes, he did the right thing. They wouldn't put, he wouldn't put that in. If they did, it was because from my quote, not theirs,
Right.
But hold on, we've got Bob from Islip Terrace who's coming into the show right now for Mike DeWidziak, and you're on Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. Bob, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Steve, in listening to you speak about the bias, I'd be interested in knowing what your personal experience is, having been a Democrat and a Republican in the news.
Well, I just mentioned one example of that, but it is incredible. That is the basis, and I swear to God, folks, I did not prop Bob to call in. Right, Bob? I didn't ask you to call in on that softball question. But my book, Bias in the Media, is how the media switched on me when I switched parties. I mean, to give you another example, when I would have a fundraiser as a Democrat, if I raised money, it was because I was popular as a Democrat. And then you become a Republican, and then it's like, oh, well, that's, tainted money, or it's money from this guy or that guy. The whole attitude, the whole perspective changed. And that was just one instance. But there are many, many, like illegal immigration, for instance. I was still a Democrat when I was promoting this. But, of course, Bob, that was a conservative perspective for me to take, that we should be enforcing our illegal immigration laws. My God, what Newsday and the New York Times did not do to me, basically calling me a bigot and being xenophobic, it was just atrocious. I don't know if you saw that over the years while you were, witnessing this.
Well, I've been a lifelong Republican, and I've kind of noticed it all along.
Yeah. So, but I definitely did see the difference as soon as I changed parties. All of a sudden, their whole perspective changed, and what was put in an article, what was left out, what they would look at, it was startling, And I actually thought that my Republican friends, Bob, who would whine about this all the time, oh, it's so biased, I thought they were just whiners. I thought they were exaggerating. And I can tell you, once I switched, without a question, it was understated what a difference it is. So,
Right. Steve, can I ask you, I know you were talking about bias, but I just wanted to throw a couple questions about if there was a decision with affirmative action.
Yes.
Recently.
And we're going to be talking about that with Dave Spritzen in about a half hour, but yes.
Okay, can I throw a couple questions that maybe you discuss
Please,
later?
yeah, absolutely.
Do you think the Obama election is a pinnacle for affirmative action?
In what way? You mean going to lead us back toward a greater use of affirmative action or a lesser use?
With his election, maybe it's getting to the point that it's maybe not needed as it was.
Oh, in other words, that we've come a long way, that we've elected our first black president. Well, good question. Let me pose that to Mike DeWidziak.
And let me throw one more out there before I hang up.
Okay.
With the population shift, in about 2040, 2042, the whites are going to be the minority in the country. Do you think that's going to have an effect with affirmative action?
Interesting.
Well, first of all...
Thanks, Bob.
First of all, let's be very, very clear about the Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court did not make this decision on the basis of race.
It was states' rights case.
Exactly. And this is a very important point, because it was upholding one of the few tools that the people actually have to influence their government around their elected representatives, which is the initiative and referendum process. It is a very, very important election reform tool. And basically what the Supreme Court said was the lower court had no right to disregard the votes and the will of the people.
But Mike, weren't you fascinated by the two justices,
right,
Ginsburg and Sotomayor,
right, actually
said that they would have invalidated.
Correct.
That the state does not have the right to say that you will not discriminate.
Mm-hmm. And this is not really the state. This was the people.
Right.
Again, this was an initiative and referendum process that put this on the ballot. And so the justices went over, in the majority decision, went over the top to say this is not a decision based upon race or even the merits of affirmative action.
It was just a question of whether individual states can do it.
Correct. It was based upon the merits of the initiative and referendum process, and saying, no, you just can't push aside the will of the people, and the votes of the people, and just invalidate that like it never existed.
I can't wait to get Dave Spritzen in here in our next segment, where I'm sure he's going to have some comments on this from the other side. Mm-hmm. But it's true. Also in the same week, we had the Chicago Sun-Times running an article where a guy basically said that if you are a conservative black Republican, you are the equivalent of a Jew helping the Nazis. And how disgraceful that was even written. And then you have the Illinois governor tweeting what a wonderful statement this was and a wonderful article. Could you imagine them publishing something the opposite of that.
Well, I mean, and they also don't forget their history too. I mean, here, because first of all, it was the Republican Party that was born in opposition to slavery. Okay, in the 1860 Democratic plank, in the presidential election, it was in there that the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal did not apply to African Americans because they weren't people; they were property. That was in the Democratic plank, So, and to equate Republicans with Nazis, it's just it's the worst.
Black Republicans, worse. Like you are
right.
You are an Uncle Tom if you are a conservative black man or woman.
It's to say that there is nothing in the Republican Party that it's basically saying that to me, it's saying that African Americans should not want to be pro-business, pro-free market, pro being successful for that matter.
Well, that's another chapter in my book about how these folks are disinvited to speak at campuses. How they are called just these awful terms. I remember one. It relates to Hispanics as well, where Bill Richardson, the former governor of New Mexico, actually said of Ted Cruz, he's not a real Hispanic because he's for enforcing immigration laws. He actually said that.
Yeah.
He's not a real Hispanic.
Well,
disgusting stuff.
Once again, they forget their history. When Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican, desegregated the federal government, after that, 10 years later, Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, resegregated the federal government.
And let's not forget that as we celebrate, LBJ and passing the civil rights law, he had to get Republican votes to get him over the top. So that's very important. All right, this is fascinating. I am sure that Dave Spritzen from the Progressive Coalition is going to want to chime in and make this a very interesting debate. Come on back at the next segment, folks. Call in at 631-451-1039 at Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. We'll see.
If it tries to interfere with the operation of multinational corporations.
And then nobody ever goes back and says, every promise they made about NAFTA turned out not to be true.
That's right. No,
nobody ever goes back and says,
well,
it didn't work
so well. That's because of the so-called liberal bias in the media that I've been hearing about.
Actually, but they were all for NAFTA. Republicans, Democrats.
No, there was a major. We did organizing. We did a lot of organizing. It was a fight in which Clinton had to pull every possible leverage he could to get that passed.
Right.
And
Jimmy Carter was for it too.
It's a corporate establishment.
I forget which debate it was. Either it was either the Gore-Bush debate.
But why don't we even hear it from your right-wing media? They don't even mention it. That's why you haven't heard of it.
You
have to listen to Ed Schultz to hear about it.
I remember, I don't know if it was the Gore-Bush debate or whether it was the Kerry-Bush debate, but it was one of the ones that I think Bob Schieffer had moderated. And he said, when he asked the NAFTA question, he said, like, and I forget what he said, Gore or Kerry, he said, he should have hit that thing out of the park, and, like, it never came down, and he couldn't have because he supported it like everybody else did, you know?
Well, not everybody. I mean, it's
Well, yeah,
I mean,
not
right,
everybody, but
right.
a vast majority.
Well, the establishment is not the vast majority. It's the people who control the corporate world whose money controls the American economy.
They did
It's not
that.
the-
They
it's
did that time.
Well, they still do.
And I mean, that was the sellout of the American worker. It really
Well,
was.
it is. Well, this would be.
And this would be too.
This
yeah.
would be.
And this would be. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
There we
So-
there we agree. Because I railed about NAFTA back then. I mean,
We had it. We got funded at a national level. We did campaigns to stop it. We did it. We did our work. We actually written up in USA Today for our work in trying to stop NAFTA.
They really should do an analysis. You really have.
Yeah, I'm saying nobody ever looks back and
That's
goes,
right.
"Well,
Did it
all right,
work or not?"
Well, no, it didn't, because they said that
It would build
the
up
only we're going to lose
Mexico.
was blue collar jobs. We weren't going to lose any white collar jobs. We were going to become like the CEOs of the world and whatever. It didn't work. It didn't work the way they promised it was going to. Let's put it that way.
Nope. I had all kind of. I had some information on that, but I don't want to spend too time with numbers.
So we'll keep going on the affirmative action thing a little bit. We'll get into the Long Island Railroad. The Cuomo thing I definitely want to get into.
Oh, yeah.
Because I want to know what you guys are thinking. The I want to see what Working Families is doing there. Maybe the mosque talk, the income inequality.
This thing blew up. I just feel like
Am I assuming that you're against Keystone? Are you against Keystone?
Oh, sure.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead. That is so damn interesting.
I mean, your arguments, I listened to as you're driving them. You're off the wall. Off the wall.
You don't think
You
it's
know,
gonna be
we just went through Sandy, right? The cost of Sandy is how many billions of dollars? Not to speak of how much of that?
That has to do
Hurricane?
with what?
Keystone Pipeline. It has to do with pumping hydrocarbons in the atmosphere.
Sandy is a result of
No, I mean, it's increasing. Everybody is increasing
Come on,
clear.
you got no.
It's increasing
Listen,
clear.
I'm a believer in global warming. Okay,
Well,
but
it's all
I
right.
cannot say that Sandy is
Well,
a result of that.
Well, it can't be a result of Keystone. Keystone wasn't done.
No.
I mean,
Obviously,
it's
but
a result. It's a result of the pumping of carbon dioxide.
Hurricane Gloria, we had no discussion then about
It's
global
well, no,
warming.
we're just going to get more and more. The oceans are rising, right? The oceans are rising.
I'm a believer. in it,
Okay,
but,
well, I mean, with the question is, how do you address that issue, right? You know, I'm not even. We can talk about what the environmental effects in the areas, the development of earthquakes. You know, where they've been pumping oil, like several of them in Youngstown, Ohio. I mean, you can talk about that. You can talk about the contamination of the drinking water. You can talk about water, water being able to burn coming out of tap water, which we've seen. Right? You can talk about those things, and those are devastating. Okay. But you got to overall. You got to talk about. Are we going to maintain the viability of the planet? And these are immediate effects. We're not talking about. We're just talking about what's going to happen in 2100 when we'll all be dead.
But how are you going to do that when the vast majority of the world now wants to live like Americans?
No. Look, I'm not. I don't. You
We're
asked
gonna
me. Do
just tax
you think it's
America
like?
and
Do
bring our
you think
economy
we're going to
down.
likely to save the planet? No. All right. I don't think so. Because there is so much vested interest. People like Mr. Levy here and the whole corporate
I'm a vested
establishment.
interest.
Of course you are.
Am I
mean,
making money off
No,
of
well,
Keystone?
no, but in terms of promoting,
Muting you.
in promoting, no, I mean, but the right is funded by your friends, right? You talk about Koch. I mean, what is he? He's trying to destroy every aspect of the New
Just 'cause
Deal,
he's funding
and at the
it
same
doesn't
time.
mean he's wrong.
No, of course that doesn't.
A lot of times he is. But
That doesn't mean he's wrong. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Doesn't that?
By the way, do you know how many environmentalists I know drive SUVs?
And
a lot
getting
of
their own
people.
jet
Yeah,
planes
and have
like the
central air
Secretary of.
conditioning-
of-
central
You
air
don't. You don't.
conditioning in their house.
You don't solve problems you solve problems by institutional changes. I mean, a tax on carbon, for example, and
you
you'll
also
find
do it
many
by-
fewer
by
people
leading-
using SUVs.
Leading by example.
Oh, but if
yeah.
every American drove a fuel efficient car rather than SUV, how much do we cut?
Those kind of arguments get nowhere, though. If every person was Christian, we'd have a nice world, right? They've been saying that for 2,000 years. It don't make shit. It doesn't matter. What you need to do is have institutional changes which change the structure of priorities, and you know that. All right? So the question is, what are the institutional changes? And one is you don't authorize the development of the Keystone Pipeline, and that you keep that oil in the ground, because it ain't going anyplace if it's not coming in. It's not going through British Columbia. It's staying in the ground. And the money, and there's no jobs
Then
involved
we
in it.
become more dependent on these creeps from the Middle East because let me
Well,
tell you, oil's going to be around for a long time. And I'm
If,
big for solar.
if they're going to be around, then we're not, or we're going to be in an increasingly vulnerable situation. All right. I mean, it's just going to happen. I mean, you can look. You can look at the map. The map that Al Gore had in his movie was absolutely correct about what happens
Listen,
if you have.
I am a
if you have-
believer in that, but you know.
well, then what? The practical
but
question
you
is,
al-
what are you going to do about it?
What's the alternative?
That's it.
I mean, you want nuclear power? Do you want
But it
hydrofracking?
will.
I mean,
Technology
what do you
will
want?
solve
That's
the
right.
problem.
You have to address those things.
Technology will solve the problem over time. You can't try to solve it.
The question is,
in
have they
1
already
year.
solved it? Repressed because
No,
too
they've
many people are making money.
They've solved it. They've solved it. They can now frack. Right? That didn't solve the problem.
It's a big part of the solution. It is.
Fracking?
Absolutely.
What solution?
Absolutely. To get away from oil. Natural gas is a lot better than oil.
No.
If you're looking for political correctness, you've come to the wrong place. It's Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, 1039 LI News Radio.
Hey, welcome back, folks, to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. This is former County Executive Steve Levy. Here on this Saturday afternoon, we are live, and we welcome you to call in at 631-451-1039. You can listen to us at linewsradio.com. And, of course, we're at 103.9 FM, the same last four numbers of our phone number, 451-1039. This is the second half of our show, and I promised you we would be joined by a very knowledgeable and articulate spokesperson on the left, and that's David Spritzen, who is a stalwart at the Long Island Progressive Coalition, still heavily involved with them. And welcome back to the show, David. You always make it interesting.
Well, my pleasure to be here.
Nice. And staying on for this next half hour as well is Mike DeWidziak, a strategist, not a really Republican strategist. He's a strategist who's dealt with both Democrats and Republicans. He's a pollster.
You were a Democrat in 85.
That's right. So he's helped me when I was both a Democrat and a Republican go back. But I love to have Mike on the show because he's as knowledgeable as anyone on these issues here on Long Island. And Dave, I don't know how much you heard, but we were having a great conversation on the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action. We'll talk about that for a little while. Then I want to get into some local stuff, like what's going to happen with the Long Island Railroad for people who are going to be going to work on Monday. But I don't know how much you heard about our conversation. As Mike said, that decision from the Supreme Court relative to that affirmative action program was not dealing with the issue of affirmative action as much as it was states' rights. Now, do you agree with the dissent, both Sotomayor and Ginsburg, who said, well, we don't think that the state, through referendum, should be able to say that you cannot discriminate, everyone should be determined on their own merits getting into a school, and should they have struck it down, or should they have allowed the state to do what they want to do in this case?
Do you feel that it is perfectly okay for, let's say, the Ivy League colleges to make a preference for children of wealthy past graduates?
If they're private in institutions, this only affected
Private.
people who were getting.
I wonder how you feel about that.
But this was only affected colleges that was getting state funding.
Right. Yeah.
To be clear.
I just wonder how you feel about that.
Well,
And,
you definitely.
What's your moral sense about that?
Athletes do get preference. You're right. Alumni get preference, and that is something that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. I guess the question here, though, is can the public say that they want it to be purely on the merits? Should we tell them that they can't? That's a big question.
A lot of questions. What you consider to be merits, for example, right? Is it a legitimate concern of a university or a university system to promote diversity. Is that a legitimate concern or not?
Well, I guess it is. And the question is, do you do it by going out? The same thing with the police department. You know, we're woefully underrepresented by minorities in the police department. One way to solve that is to have a quota system, which has been struck down and is not really used. The other way is to go out there and affirmatively try to attract more applicants and things of that sort. But I want you guys to hold that thought, because we have Greg from Comac who's chiming in, and we always like to get the public to chime in. Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Steve. First-time caller, but a long-time listener. I really appreciate the local content of your show.
Thank you.
Hey, I have a question on the media, and I'm not a huge fan of the media, but is the media really to blame fully here, and not just people wanting to get engaged in local government and local issues? A great example, I think, is that a lot of people will complain about local taxes, but only, I think I read, 15 or 18% of the people show up at the local school board vote. And so I wonder if you and Mike can just spend a minute, talking about how people just need to get better engaged and better focused on the issues that the media provides to us, and then maybe the media will pay attention more.
Well, great point, Greg. Let me just say this, and this is, again, Steve Levy. You're listening to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, 451-1039. Sometimes I think the media gets a bad rap, as they did by some who said that the media was stepping over the line and with the overkill on the Bridgegate scandal, Chris Christie Bridgegate scandal. I think that was a very serious thing. When you talk about closing down a bridge, I mean, people could die from that. What I find still media bias is that when it's a Republican like Christie that does it, they will cover it to the max, which, again, justifiably. But when Al Sharpton did it back in 2009 to protest the Sean Bell decision, he closed down 4 bridges and 2 tunnels. It was a story quickly, and it quickly went away. It wasn't the subject of editorials, but a terrible thing that people can die. That's the double standard I see. Well, but let's hear from our guys.
Well, that might be true, but Greg still made a terrific point. I mean, it's not just school board elections and fire district elections and library board elections that get these low turnouts. We're now down in our local elections for county, town elections. We are now down to 1 in 5 of the eligible voters actually participating in a lot of these elections, and that's abysmal.
Media bias, though. I think
that wasn't Greg's point. Greg's point was that people have to take responsibility themselves for the kind. The old saying that you get the kind of government you deserve.
Yeah, I mean, there are good reasons for that, and a lot of it has to do. You mentioned gerrymandering in a previous segment. Right. Gerrymandering is an absolute disaster.
No
it is abomination.
But you think it's only the Republicans?
No. Actually, it was established by Eldridge Gerry, governor of Massachusetts, in 1812, when he developed drew discs that one looked like a salamander.
Right.
So they call it gerrymandering. No, I mean, different groups do it in different ways to different extents. Right?
All do it.
Right? To different extents.
Every party does.
Right? And we talked about that once before, because one of the few things you did good while you were as legislator.
I'll give you a whole list that you agree with,
was passed impartial gerrymandering and impartial redistricting, and it was the Democratic-controlled legislature destroyed it after the Republicans had undermined it. So it's a complicated joint deal. But the problem with that is what you end up is, rather than the people choosing their representatives, the representatives choose their people by the way they district, and then the people say, "What does it matter if this is a Republican district? This is a Democratic district." I mean, where's the involvement and what is the significance of it? That's just one aspect. Second, of course, is the role of money in politics. You touched on that before, in a little biased kind of fashion. I mean, the reality is we have destroyed any intelligent ability to control money in politics in accordance with our notion somehow that money is speech and that corporations are persons. Two total abominations of the 14th Amendment.
Well, what do you think? What we brought up was just the hypocrisy.
It's not hypocrisy.
Well, wait, let me make my point.
You're talking about Bloomberg, you're talking about... That's not hypocrisy. It's the only... I mean... It is an abomination.
Bloomberg spent $50 million on an anti-gun crusade.
What is he going to do?
And not the Koch brothers.
The Koch brothers are doing it. This is the situation. How do you combat the situation? What do you want? Unilateral disarmament? I mean, there's no question that if you're talking about how much money is going from the wealthy into the political process, it's not going to the Democrats, and it's certainly not going to my working
Tom
family's
Steyer,
party.
a Democratic liberal billionaire,
Right.
is now saying, I'm going to expend a boatload of my fortune toward promoting those who oppose Keystone. That is okay to you, but the Koch brothers saying that they're going to put in money to support Keystone is not?
No, look, that is the playing field we're in now. I mean, Andrew Cuomo has raised, $33 million for a campaign? It is an abomination, okay? There is no equity in the system. Now, how do you respond to it now? You got two things to do. One is you need to change the system. I am in favor of a constitutional amendment which says that the 14th Amendment says, corporations are not persons. And number two, that money is not speech. And it is perfectly reasonable, as every other intelligent, industrial, westernized country does, controls what you can spend in a political campaign, and even goes further and makes somewhat equitable the access to the media. You talk about media bias, right? What is the media? The media becomes a funneling machine for vast amounts of money. Okay, it should not be doing that in the electoral process.
We also
there should be some equitable.
When Newsday was controlled by the Long Island Power Lilco way back when, remember that?
It's horrendous.
Again, Mike,
okay,
comment on this.
Well, I want to point out one thing which I think is very important here is that we all agree that redistricting and gerrymandering has been a very corrupting influence on the political process, and the few states that have addressed it and have actually done something about it, have done it through the initiative and referendum process, which is what the Supreme Court just upheld. Right. That's the whole point of their decision.
Yeah, I didn't take issue with that question. Yeah. We don't have that process in the
state
do not.
Of New York. Correct, okay. And we need it.
In fact, when I was in the state assembly, I think I was the first person in the state legislature to ever put in the bill to give us initiative and referendum. And folks should know, we have it just for Suffolk County through special legislation dating back to the late 70s. It's so awkward and cumbersome. It's very, very difficult to get something on the ballot. But we should have that ability to get these propositions on the ballot.
There's only a handful of states that have a workable initiative and referendum.
But you're still in that. I think I'm in favor of initiative. That's a progressive era initiative of the first part of the 20th century. But at the same time, you've got to have some way of controlling the money thing. The money in the political system has become absolutely outrageous. You want to run for office, the first thing they ask you is, can you raise $1 million? Right? Well,
you
forget it. I'm not interested in you.
All right, Dave.
And you know that.
Dave, speaking of that, there was talk on the state level that this was going to be the year for public financing, and a lot of the progressives were behind it 100%. And listen, I've always been in favor of public finance. I think they went a little overboard with a 6-to-1 match. But anyway, it didn't happen. They did it for an experimental proposition with the comptroller's office in such a poor fashion that even the comptroller said, I don't want to do this. Now, you guys in the Progressive Coalition, I know a number of other leftist groups, including the Working Families Party, were very, very mad at Cuomo. I'm almost the one trying to give him a pass, because how does he get it done when, there's not the votes to do it? But you guys are coming down on him very, very hard. And the question is, as in this article in Newsday this week, Cuomo says left poses no challenge, but there are others who are saying maybe he should worry. He may not get that Working Families Party, even though he might not need it since he's very high in the polls. But what's going to happen there?
Well, let me say one thing. First, let me take a little plug. All right, the campaign for public finance. It was a campaign created by my organization 15 years ago. I represent the Long Island Progressive Coalition on the board of Citizen Action of New York. It's a Citizen Action of New York campaign, of which we're the local affiliate. All right, so we've been organizing this for 15 years. All right, and yes, I think he sold us out on it. Okay,
and I was giving him a little bit of a break.
I don't give many
sellout, man. You don't get me.
I give no break
damaging than that.
Between him and Klein. I mean, they all right, let's leave it at that. The point is, if you ask me what I think is going to happen, I would think that the Working Families Party will have a separate candidate. It will not be Cuomo. And the recent poll by Siena News suggests that a Working Families Party candidate, unknown at the time, is at the same standing as Astorino for Republicans, at 24%.
24%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Cuomo,
I didn't
Cuomo
see
would
that.
go from 58 to 28 against Just Astorino to 39, 24, 24.
Ooh, we got a
if there's
cat rate.
Now, I don't really think it would end up that way.
I don't think so either,
by the way.
because-
But it does say that it could eat out of his election total, and you don't want an embarrassing election.
Because normally Working Families Party will get you, like on a local level, 2%. Maybe if it's really high
it's been
profile,
Well,
maybe
this is
5%.
This is measuring the ire of the left at Andrew
going up,
Cuomo right now.
right? And look,
Because right now they don't have a choice.
Listen, I attended your luncheon, and it was tee-off time on Andrew Cuomo. I have
Right,
to say.
absolutely right. I was glad you were there. I appreciate that. And I mean, by the way, the Working Families Party was really the vehicle through which de Blasio got elected mayor of New York City.
Right.
It basically has an effective working majority, the city council in New York City, and it's some of that as a result of public financing, which was a campaign we started and maintained with our initial election in 1998.
Aren't you concerned that, let's talk about de Blasio for a second
Yeah.
here. Where, I mean, yeah, I get a kick at it when he's at 38% in the polls and he's getting booed at Shea Stadium, and all officials get booed, but he was exceptionally booed. And I said last week, hey, what are you people booing for? You wanted this.
Nice. You
This
voted
is what
for
this
it.
guy
You
said he
voted
was
for
going to
it
do. He's going to espouse all of Dave Spritzen's liberal policies.
Made no bones
And now they're mad about it. He's stopping stop and frisk. He's stopping surveillance of the mosque. He's, trying to kill charter schools. This is what you guys voted for, Mike.
Fantastic.
Well,
I think it's
here's-
great.
here's ridiculous.
He's
Hold on,
really,
Dave,
he's
wait,
really
go,
doing
go.
what he said he was going to do. And I think
Exactly.
that's
Destroying the
fantastic.
city. Go ahead,
But
Mike.
here's what I think the ridiculousness of
Yeah.
this, because it's going to tie back to the Bloomberg thing, is that gun ownership in this country has gone down from a high in 1973 of 53% down to about 32% today. Okay, now there's two major reasons for that. Number one, the decline in interest in hunting as a sport nationally, and the decline in crime. People don't think they have to be armed. So gun ownership's down to about 32%. Now, de Blasio is going to stop and frisk, and let's stop calling it stop and frisk, just getting the guns off the street, okay?
With Chicago can
Crime's
use, by
going to
the
go
way.
back up, and gun ownership's going to go back up, while Bloomberg's spending $50 million to try to get gun ownership down. Does that make any sense?
And here was Christine Quinn, by
I
the
don't
way.
think that your reasoning there is fully coherent, nor are your facts fully coherent. I mean,
the facts are the facts, as far as gun ownership is concerned. Gun ownership has gone down
The amount
drastically.
of guns out has increased, but the number of gun
The number
owners
of
is less.
guns. No, you're right. You're
That's
right.
right.
You,
Okay,
you
all
have
right.
you have
Okay.
these people with 20 guns
I
in their gun
understand-
closets. I
I
understand.
And a lot of them are illegal
But
guns,
we're-
which
but
gun
we're talking
control
the
does not
number
work
of
for.
people
And-
owning
but
guns
this-
is down drastically.
I understand that. And the second thing is you drew some kind of conclusion that because he's going to stop and frisk, the number of guns is going to go up.
Well, that's when crime went down in the city.
But that's not. But that's
when they
not,
took the guns off the
but
street.
that's not true. I mean,
Of course it is.
Crime went down
Of course,
all
when
across the
Giuliani
country.
when Giuliani got the guns
No.
off the street, they made it an initiative in the city, and they saw a one-for-one correlation with crime going down.
No, the reduction of crime has gone all across the country. It's gone across cities that have stop and frisk. It's gone equally across cities that did not have stop
Not
and frisk.
proportionally. But you're
Yes,
right, David
proportionally.
Spritzer.
So you are not for getting the guns off the street?
Of course, I'm forgetting guns to street.
All
Stop and
right,
frisk.
so what are
stop
we
and
arguing
frisk.
about?
Stop and frisk is not the direct and only way to get guns off
You're
the street.
right, it's not.
Absolutely, of
And
course.
stop and frisk was not the
I mean,
only
that's
reason.
not the reason it was being done.
Dave, it was not, and this is Speak Out Long Island with
Yeah.
Steve Levy, 451-1039. But David Spritzen, stop and frisk was not the only reason. You don't think it had anything to do with it. I think it had a large part to do with it. No question about it. Fewer people in that demographic age group had a lot to do with the reduction in crime. Fewer people 18 to 30 years old, you had an ebbing of crack. There were a lot of different things, but I really believe stop and frisk had a big part of it because, yes, while crime went down across the country because of the demographic changes, proportionally in New York, it went off the charts. And now you're way down. And you've got Chicago with murder rates that are mirroring what they were way back when. Those guys are in need of a stop and frisk. They've got to get the guns out of the hands of the gang members.
I think really what I really
and
think,
they've got the toughest gun control in the nation there.
But I think you really, really to step back, I think you really have a wrong conception of how's the best way to deal with crime in a city. I mean, there are really, let's say, oversimplified two possibilities. One is what you might call the Kelly and Bloomberg version of law enforcement. all right, which is somewhat similar militarily to our way of dealing with Iraq, militarily. We're going to really give it to them. We're going to put heavy, strict enforcement. We're going to bring all the troops and all the arms, and we're going to do street by street, etc. And then alternative strategy, right, is to develop trust and cooperation between communities and the
so
police,
nebulous.
and developing really working relations. There are many places that do that, and it works. Where the police are not seen as the enemy. It's not like an occupying army. White police in black areas or Hispanic areas, which is essentially what that is. I mean,
I've been hearing that in Chicago. It's not working.
Where do you know? You don't hear that. You don't hear that in Chicago, but you did have that kind of success. Braxton, some of that in Los Angeles.
I don't like oversimplified answers and results. The things. But the bottom line is, if it's something that works, you keep doing it, and if it's not working, you stop. Getting the guns off the street worked. Okay, the surveillance of the mosque did not. Okay, Kelly admitted it never led to one investigation of terrorism at all. Never led to one lead. That wasn't working. So stop doing it.
That is a very hot topic. Where Congressman Pete King, who just went to a mosque this past week, and he's very critical of them stopping this because I'm kind of torn on it because you want to look at the places where the hotbeds for the problem are, but by the same token,
but they didn't find any hotbeds.
And how do you say it is a problem with the Catholic Church? Could you have folks just zeroing in on Catholic churches if there was a problem there without any kind of reasonable suspicion? It's a really it's a fine line. But Dave, I'm sure I know where you come down on it. You probably support
the more you can work
position.
with, the more the better. I mean, you really need is good intelligence. You need good intelligence. To have good intelligence, you have to be able to develop the kind of trusting relation with the community that they're willing to share information when they know something.
Well, Congressman King's point was...
Intelligence is the crew.
Congressman King's point was, in the Muslim community, and Bob Beckel's a big critic of this too, and he's a Democrat on the 5, and he says, we need moderate Muslims to come out and speak out when there are these kind of radicals there, and the fear is that they weren't. I got to tell you, I had a very good relationship with the Muslim community in Suffolk when I was county executive. They were some of the warmest, wonderful people you'd ever meet in your lives. Notwithstanding that, it's still within the mosque that you ferment a lot of these folks. Not in the ones on Long Island that I saw. I thought it was a great thing that Congressman King got to see some of his people, some of the warmest people I've ever met. But why do our law enforcement people look in certain demographics? Because that's where the crime is. So it kind of makes sense that, and I want to dovetail to this in the next segment to talk about the Trayvon Martin case a little bit, because his dad was here on Long Island saying that he should be considered a civil rights person. Isn't it logical for a night watchman like a George Zimmerman to look at a young person to be more likely to commit a crime than an old person? That's what profiling is, and profiling's not always wrong. You don't want to say black or white or this, but young people tend to commit more crimes than older people. Males commit more crimes than females do. We got about 30 seconds left.
Do you know that when I was teaching at Long Island University Post, I had students who were black track stars, and if they would go out running around the streets of Brookville, they would get stopped all the time. They couldn't run.
Hey, men in business suits don't get cabs. Black men, it's disgusting. Hey, listen, it's Mike DeWidziak. Thanks for being with us for this hour. Stay tuned, folks, because Dave is going to be with us in the last half hour.
Atlantic Beach Bridge in Lawrence around 2:30 a.m. News 12 reports the driver's injuries are considered serious. In sports, the Mets beat the Raptors to take the lead in their playoff series. The Rangers lose to the Flyers, and that evens up their series at 2 games apiece. Stay up to the minute with Long Island News. Like us on Facebook and visit linewsradio.com. For 1039 LI News Radio, I'm George Romano.
Latest from ABC News, I'm Daniela Blanca. Multiple tornadoes did touch down in North Carolina, confirms the National Weather Service. John Pack, director of Beaufort County Emergency Services, says 200 homes are damaged and
16 people have been taken to Beaufort Hospital here in Washington, North Carolina. I do not know the status of those other than the emergency room would call me if any of those had passed away. And right now we have no reported deaths from this series of events, which is a very blessed day.
National Weather Service meteorologist Doug Speehaver says that more severe weather is possible today and tomorrow in 23 states.
We will have changes from isolated severe thunderstorms across portions of North Texas and Oklahoma, and extending into Kansas here this afternoon.
The NBA is investigating whether Los Angeles Clippers owner Donald Sterling made racially insensitive remarks in an audio recording that's been posted online by TMZ Sports. Catholics from around the world are flocking to the Vatican to witness the historic canonization of 2 modern-day popes by 2 living popes.
Up to 1 million Catholics expected to celebrate the lives of these 2 very different popes in a moment of what's really Catholic unity. John Paul II seen as a hero to conservatives, John the 23rd seen as the hero to liberals. Pope Francis celebrating their canonization on the same day is essentially telling the church to come together.
That's ABC's Terry Moran. In the wake of last week's deadly avalanche that killed 16 Sherpa guides, the remainder of the climbing season on Mount Everest has been scrubbed. The most valuable piece of Titanic paperwork, a letter written by a survivor aboard the ship the day it hit an iceberg, has sold at auction for just under $200,000. This is ABC News.
LI News Radio traffic.
Watch out for an accident on westbound Sunrise Highway in Copaig, out in the area of Bayville Avenue. Some stop-and-go traffic getting into or that vicinity. We've also got the new road layout. Construction on Sunrise Highway both ways between North Road and Stephen Hans Path, not causing too much of a slowdown right now. And over on Wisconsin Highway, the long-term repairs in both directions as you make your way between Hop Hog Road and Mount Pleasant Road. As you make your way onto the LIE, not doing all too badly from Route 110 all the way on out toward Riverhead. We also are doing pretty well on the northern and southern state parkways. Nichols Road a little slow north through Center Reach, Hawkins on up toward Oxhead Road, but Middle Country Road in good order. And one more accident in West Babylon, this on Great East Neck Road right at the area of Rayville. I'm Andrew Torres on 1039 LI News Radio.
LI News Radio weather.
Heaviest morning rain now ending. We get a little break before another brief chance of showers before gradually becoming mostly sunny. West winds later, high 63. Then showers likely again, possibly a thunderstorm tonight. Meteorologist John Revenue, 1039 LI News Radio.
Westbury Toyota is expanding its dealership, and they want you to benefit from their pre-grand opening of the new showroom sale. Drive away in a 2014.5 Camry LE, including backup camera. Now available at Westbury Toyota for the end-of-the-month sale special. Only $7,500, and that includes your taxes. That's only $7,500 with taxes included. Call 877-403-9970 to reserve your 2014.5 Camry LE today. That's 877-403-9970. This offer is so good, I'm telling you twice. Call or stop in now for this unbelievable offer from Westbury Toyota. They're expanding their dealership and need to make room. Be one of the first ones to drive off in a 2014.5 Camry LE with backup camera for only $7,500, taxes included. Call 877-403-9970. 877-403-9970. Stop in and become a part of the Westbury Toyota family.
Hi, this is Bruce Shepard, Vice President of Sales for JVC Media. If you're currently working in radio sales and the growth potential where you are just isn't there, I'd love to talk to you about opportunity. JVC is in growth mode, and we're recruiting for current and future sales positions
Welcome back, folks. Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. This is former County Executive Steve Levy in the last segment of our 2-hour show. It's live. We want you to call in, 451-1039. It was such a great conversation in the last segment that we asked Mike DeWidziak, our strategist, political strategist, to stay on because the dialogue between Mike and Dave Spritzen from the Progressive Coalition was so good. Dave was magnanimous enough to say, yeah, let Mike stay on a little while and take some of my time. But the dialogue and the debate is awesome. And I want to get into something, folks, right now. Very local, the Long Island Railroad, the potential strike can paralyze this island. And I'll tell you, David Spritzen, it's ticking me off because I think here is our opportunity to finally change these ridiculous work rules. And instead, you've got the federal government trying to put pressure on the MTA board, which I usually despise, but now you've got an MTA board who's trying to do the right thing. They're trying to get tough, and they're trying to say, hey, we're not going to stick it to the commuters anymore. They're paying enough money. We're not going to stick it to taxpayers. We want give-backs. We want to change these darn rules that say you get an extra day's pay if you worked on a diesel train and an electric train in the same day. We want to stop these ridiculous disability pensions that are costing us $1 billion in the MTA. Thank goodness they're trying to get tough. They've offered, I think, a very reasonable package, 6 years, 11%. It's about 2% a year, which is pretty much the norm out there right now. And yet the union is saying not enough, no givebacks, and yet the 2% a year is not enough. Hey, how about it, federal government? How about it, local officials? Back up the MTA management. Let's get some givebacks. Now's the time you got to do it. Same with Nassau County, with NYFA. They want to get their increases, but they're not giving anything back. Now's the time to do it. You got the leverage. Get something back. David, where am I wrong?
Well, it depends how you frame an issue, Steve, right? I mean, what kind of transportation policy do we have in the United States? What is the nature of our rail system? Do you ever go to any European country and ride the rails there?
That's a bad comparison. They're older and they're more condensed.
I'm saying...
They're more densely populated.
Huh?
It's more densely populated.
But it's subsidized. It's subsidized, and in a way, obviously, we talk about the question of rules and whether they're appropriate and inappropriate. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, whether on a diesel train and an electric train the same day or something. All right, okay. All right, I'm not involved in the internal structure of the negotiations. I can't even talk about the exact details. All right, but I'm appalled by our failure to really develop an effective public transportation system. And
how can you do it when all the money's going to this waste?
The only place, and this is something I raised up to you many years ago when you spoke at a LIMBA meeting, and I actually I did raise the same same idea to Swazi, and then I actually sent him a letter because he asked me for a letter, which I actually have a copy of here, but I won't read to you. All right. But the point is that you cannot address problems like public transportation unless you really had significant commitment from the federal government, because they are the only people that have the capacity to significantly raise the revenue. All right, for affordable housing, for infrastructure development, all of those things.
Well, they're not being.
Instead we hear all this stuff about the budget deficit. We don't have the money. Meanwhile, we've cut corporate taxes so that 1/3 of all the Fortune 500 companies don't pay taxes. Some get money back. We got this oil loophole where we just don't address intelligently.
But I'll have you know, David Spritzen,
yes,
that the law says that, and we were talking about this off the record before Mike DeWidziak. Mm-hmm. The law says that the MTA and the railroad is supposed to be self-sufficient in that the amount of money that is raised from the railroad fees and things is supposed to pay for it. It does not.
No, it does not.
It does not. It has not. It will not. It never does.
No, because they're not going to price it out of existence because no one would ride the railroad then. If they charge full fare what it costs, nobody would ride the railroad.
Isn't this the time, instead of asking for more from riders who are paying
you can't raise
$300 to go into the city? Shouldn't we get some givebacks from these unions that are out of control, Mike?
Well, I think there's two things here. you could charge full fare for people who are going in to see a Broadway play or Ranger game, as opposed to somebody who's going into work. You could have a dual rate system, if you will. I mean, look,
a casual user versus a regular,
or even just times. Like if I'm going in on a Saturday, night, I'm going in to see a Ranger game or a Broadway play or something. Why shouldn't I pay full fare? I never asked them to subsidize my ride.
Good
point.
I wouldn't support that, because I think it would only encourage people to take more cars.
Because you could do means testing.
Hold the thought. We got Steve from Riverhead calling in. Maybe he's got something to add on this or something we talked about earlier. Steve, welcome to Speak Out Long Island.
How you doing today?
Great, thanks a lot. What's on your mind, Steve?
Well, no, I was just listening to what you were saying before regarding, I guess, if you're working on an electric train and a diesel train, you get another day's pay. I mean, I'm part of a union, and I think unions are great, but whatever happened to getting paid for what you work and not taking advantage of the system? I imagine if the MTA, if they did that, if they're like the boss, I mean, there would be so much money saved, and they wouldn't, be raising fares like they are and whatnot, and there would be less abuse of the system.
Well, very objective, independent view from a fellow who is in a union himself. And we should say not all unions are alike. I mean, I look at the county unions. You got some people have been working for 30 years. They're still only making $35,000. And you contrast that with a police union where guys are making $200,000. And here again, you've got a union that has often gone out of control.
I agree with you.
Oh, okay.
I have to say something. I think I disagree with both of you on this. On this point, the unions are doing their job.
Oh, right.
Well, yes. Their job is to get the best deal they possibly can for their membership. Their job isn't to look after us taxpayers.
Well, I agree with you there.
All right. It's the elected officials who bow down to them and cave to these ridiculous contracts. That's where the fault lies. Not the union leadership is doing what they're supposed to do.
Well, it's only some of the problems you're talking about. Certain unions, the police being, I think, the most effective in using their leverage for political purposes.
Steve,
but then you have the arbitration situation, which tends to ratchets up these agreements across. I mean, so that a policeman in Asheroken is getting the same amount.
And it allows everybody past the buck.
That's right.
No responsibility.
That's right.
You had mentioned, we need the federal government. We got to get the same kind of transportation system they've got in Europe. But I got to tell you, I say this all the time. I'm going to say it again, okay? If you tried to build a cross-continental railroad today, if you tried to build a cross-country road system, you couldn't do it. You couldn't, not only because of the money, the environmentalist.
But that's not the answer.
You'd have a snail darter here, a spotted owl over there, tortoise like in Nevada over there. They'd stop it everywhere you go.
We have plenty of hard rail to go from New York to Chicago or wherever you want to do. Yeah. That's not the problem. The problem is light rail. The problem is there's no light rail systems to travel locally, like on Long Island or in other municipalities.
Well, I mean, that's the second part. I totally agree with it. The first part, I think we need you can't really run fast trains on
you can't run a bullet train.
You can't run really fast trains that run on the thing with freight.
Right.
So you got the freight problem. You got but it's certainly light rail. Absolutely. But I think the problem is not the environmentalists with respect to development of public transportation. The problem is the right wing and the corporate establishment has nothing to do with the environmentalists. Speaking as an environmentalist, we would be out there. I'm out there, leading the charge as I have on light rail.
Maybe you, David. Maybe you, but there would be 6-7 groups popping up every 2 miles. You can't build. Look at the Keystone Pipeline. You can't build the Keystone Pipeline because it goes through this prairie or something. Oh, come on, give me a break.
Keystone Pipeline is a totally different issue than public transportation. Any confusion of them is
it's similar in that my point is you can't. It's so hard to get things built today. It's just cost prohibitive because extremists make it so. And like Long Island, let's look at transportation here. I've always said, we can improve transportation in Suffolk, but it's not going to be New York City or even Nassau because when it's densely populated, it's just easier.
I understand that.
When you have to take a car to get to the bus stop, it's hard.
But you don't
Same thing with Europe versus America.
Do you see significant environmental opposition to public transportation
Not buses.
down
Buses are
110, down 110
you already have the road developed.
or toward
No.
I mean, obviously there's opposition to widening to electrifying some of the trains or widening creating separate lines, but that's not really environmental opposition.
Environmental
That's
stop the
opposition.
cable across the sound that would have given us a tremendous amount of energy for no real reason, for some I don't know, some mussel that lived on the bottom of the bay of the sound. It's crazy, just crazy stuff that cost us a fortune. Oh boy! All right, guys, listen. Let's shift to another issue. Newsday did a poll of a number of local officials. Where do you stand on medical marijuana? We've got.
I just came back from Denver.
No,
actually,
your eyes looked a little glassy.
I tell you, the thing is, the situation. I think ultimately marijuana is going to be totally legalized across the country. It just take a while. What the reality is that you go to Denver and you cannot buy. You can, if you're out of state, you can buy much less than if you're in state. But you can't smoke at any place except in your home and someone else's home. So you can't do it in a hotel. You can't do it in the street.
Mike,
so my
wife
was looking with some friends and they went there was no place that they could do it. They didn't buy any, and I didn't even go to try and buy it. So the problem is I mean, all these questions are questions really with respect to the kind of controls you're going to place on it. I mean, I think medical marijuana, sure, absolutely. I think it should be done. I think you should legalize marijuana. I think you should.
Now, there's a difference between decriminalizing and legalizing.
Right.
I don't have a problem with decriminalizing.
Yeah.
My concern about legalizing might be sending a message, especially young people. Go ahead, light up. It's now becoming easier to get a marijuana cigarette than a regular cigarette with everything they're putting on regular cigarettes. But Mike, is it the revenue that's going to be the driving force in this issue? Whereas I think Colorado's getting $200 million out of the tax.
It almost always is, Steve. It's always follow the money.
I think
medical marijuana should be a no-brainer. That to me is it's a no-brainer.
I was surprised how many electeds refused to answer that question on medical marijuana. I thought that would be easy too.
Well, I think that
seems like a no-brainer to me. I mean, and again, if the medical community especially takes a very strong stand you're pretty much covered, I think, as an elected official.
I think people are worried about. I think the elected officials are just worried about being vulnerable to attacks.
But Dave, haven't you been amazed though at the swing in this country in a liberal way, where 5 years ago you were talking about gay marriage, if you were talking about legalizing marijuana, you were talking about so many. It was unheard of, and now,
but you know what? Things change on a dime sometimes, and sometimes it takes longer to change. But in the early 1960s, it was illegal for blacks and whites to marry in some states in the country. Things change.
It's been so rapid.
I think certainly the legalization of gay marriage is remarkable. It does surprise me how quickly it has happened.
Mike, you remember just 10 years ago, liberal was a dirty word. An elected
I think liberal still is a dirty word. We say progressive now. We don't say liberal.
I consider myself. Look, I'm not. First place, I'm not a member of the Democratic Party. Right. Number one. Number two. I mean,
you were a proud liberal from way back when.
Well, I mean, I think I like to consider myself as to the left of the liberals. I mean, for me, that's the whole meaning and significance of the Progressive Coalition.
I really think
sometime I want to present that worldview thing I sent to you sometime, not today, and get feedback from your audience and discuss it instead of what a vision is of really a decent society. Right.
I just think that, there are these fluctuations. Reagan was a conservative time, and then it stayed that way for a long, long time. Now you're seeing this dip to the liberal side. There's always the potential to go overboard, Mike, and I think that the Blasios and the Pelosi's tend to go there. And when you have Steve Israel, a local guy, calling saying that Republicans are motivated by racism. You have Occupy Wall Street. This ticks off a lot of independents.
I totally agree with you. The rhetoric has gotten to be very nasty, very extremist, and it's on both sides, to be fair. And you just invoked Ronald Reagan's name. He would be unacceptable to the Tea Party today. He raised taxes. He cut deals with the Democrats. He would be completely unacceptable.
But Bill O'Reilly, the Newsday columnist, not the Fox guy, had wrote a great article, David, about how JFK would be unacceptable to the Democratic Party today.
No question.
Cut taxes, strong on defense, federal government shouldn't get too big.
Well, I mean, that's the Clinton program. I don't think there's a great deal of difference. I mean, I find Clinton unacceptable myself personally, but that's personally I'm not.
Hillary or Bill?
Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton. I think.
Despite the fact that we had 8 years of robust prosperity.
Well, certainly far better than we have under Bush. There's no question about that.
And Obama.
Obama, because he's hamstringed by the Republican Congress.
5 years later, you're still saying this?
Well, there's no question. Mike just said it before. You got a party that is simply committed to defeating him. I mean, and to stopping anything progressive because they're afraid. Anyway. Because they're afraid. I mean, look, Obama is a corporate Democrat. Okay. I mean, anybody.
Now, if
He's
you said
certainly
Clinton,
not a progressive Democrat.
if you said Hillary or Bill,
no,
but Obama
is a corporate Democrat. Anybody who puts Tim Geithner at the head of Secretary at the Treasury and gets Larry Summers
Jones in his cabinet.
Well, he didn't keep him there. He should have kept him there. He should have got rid of Geithner and Van Jones. The point is that he's not a progressive. He's not a progressive Democrat. Okay,
you know, he talks like a moderate, but he does govern like a liberal, and the people let's just Perez, this nutcase Perez in charge of labor, and the people he puts up to run these positions. They're so far out there. I think far more liberal than he is. But that's what you get.
I just think he's very professorial and he's very cautious.
Yeah,
and that doesn't make you a Ronald Reagan leader type person, if you will. You know, he's extraordinary. I mean, he didn't come out pro gay marriage until the polls shifted.
Well, he evolved. By the way, that's another bias in the media. If it was a Democrat, if it was a Republican, he would have flip flopped. Yeah. It was Obama. He evolved,
and even then, he only said he personally. He didn't say that he thought it should be the rule of the land or anything, or that it should be constitutional. He just said that he was personally had evolved on the issue.
I think he's probably. I don't know him personally. I think he's probably a very decent person, probably a nice family man. Very thoughtful, intelligent man. I actually read both of his books before. I was very impressed with his autobiography. I think it's brilliant.
Dave Spritzen from the Progressive Coalition. Do you wish that Barack Obama was more of an LBJ? When it comes to
absolutely,
Peter Goldmark was a columnist for Newsday. I think said it right. You know, this guy's a professor. He's a smart guy. He might be well intentioned, but you got to know the art of the deal. And he doesn't seem to know it.
LBJ may have been one of the most effective presidents in domestic legislation that we've ever had in this country.
And Senate leaders, too.
Well, Senate leaders, too. I'm just referring to his presidential. Yeah, absolutely. Right? And I think if you look at the list of accomplishments that LBJ accomplished, it's really absolutely outstanding, including Medicare and Medicaid.
You could say, okay, you've got a Congress that is trying to stymie your every move. But why couldn't you come say, hey, look, I want minimum wage. Give me minimum wage, and I'll give you some type of entitlement form. You don't see the passion. You know, you see President Obama speak passionate. Every once in a while he comes out with a passionate speech, like he did on healthcare.
Honestly, he's very passionate as a candidate. Right. I don't see that passion as president.
You don't see it. You don't see it when he's fighting Putin.
He was a tremendous candidate. I just don't see that. I don't see that edge he had as a candidate as president.
I agree with that. I mean, he disappoints me. I mean, is he better than the Republican alternatives? It's not even the same ballpark as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, no, I think he's been very disappointing. And he's on economic things. He's had some good proposals with economic development, not adequate, as Krugman pointed out right in the very beginning. But it was but he couldn't even get those two adequately through the House. He had to make all kind of compromises with tax cuts, which were not very useful. And the amount of money was too little. It did help minimize the disaster. And the real economic development things, which the kind of things that LBJ did or FDR did, he didn't. I don't think he didn't even present them and argue for them. Not like what he could have. Didn't fight the issues.
In the 3 minutes left here, I want to see if I can get you on the record here. Would you support any of the proposals that this coalition coming together on May 8th at Melville Marriott at 7 p.m.
Probably not.
Well, let's see.
Let's go ahead.
You know what the proposals are.
I said probably.
They want to cap mandatory arbitration awards at 2%. Because they think, some of the police salaries are getting out of hand. They want to stop the Triborough Amendment.
I do think the police salaries have gotten out of hand. I agree with that on Long Island.
I find you reasonable.
The Triborough Amendment has to do. You have to also. We did that before. You also have to talk about the question of the capacity of public employees to strike. That was part of the deal in the Tribal Amendment.
Yeah, but remember, federal officials don't have the right to strike. And they don't have a tribal amendment. In other states, they don't have the right to strike, and they don't have a tribal amendment. It's an anomaly here in New York, and a tribal, for our audience, is continued step increases even after the public sector contract has expired. And Mike, we've got another one, which is pension reform that would go to a defined contribution like you have in the private sector. It's only in the public sector that you get a guaranteed benefit. Well, is it time for a change?
Well, there's not that they have to. I mean, these municipalities all over the country are facing bankruptcy if they don't do something. I mean, it's well past time. I mean, when the economy was cooking and money was pouring into governments, you could afford to offer these kind of deals. That time is past.
Dave, in a minute left, are those on the left ever going to come together on some kind of an agreement for entitlement reform or, stopping this growth, which is unsustainable?
Well, if you mean cutting Social Security, the answer is no. It
No,
should
I
be
agree.
increased. Social Security.
What about
the whole notion of entitlement? The whole
retirement date.
Huh?
What about the retirement date?
Well, it's a more complicated question. When you say entitlement reform, it means a lot of different things.
Right.
I want to make sure that we separate our Social Security, which is an autonomous program, is perfectly sound financially, and if there's any kind of minor tweaking that needs to be done for the next 35 years, it can be done very simply. I mean, I don't know any other program that has the kind of economic prospects of for the next 35 years of Social Security. So shouldn't be even in the discussion. It should be simply taken off the table. What we really do should be increasing the benefits of Social Security, not cutting them. If you want to increase the amount that people have
disability and food stamps in the last 15 seconds?
Absolutely.
keep them growing.
Absolutely. You have to increase them, especially in this economic time.
I hope we don't become the next Detroit. We'll see.
Well,
that is a debate we're going to have again. You guys are awesome. Having the two of you together, it just flows so much because there are a few people more knowledgeable or articulate from the right, the left, the center, whatever you want to call it. Hey, folks, thanks for a great session here today. We're going to see you next week on Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. See you then.